And ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our top story tonight. Well, national outrage continues over the tragic death of a 34-year-old Atul Subhash, a software techie who died by suicide in Bengaluru recently. And that has set off a discourse over the top court's concern on misuse of law, particularly IPC Section 498A. Now, the Supreme Court today expressed concern over the large-scale misuse of this section, which punishes cruelty by husbands and their relatives against married women. In fact, the court noted that the law, originally intended to protect women from domestic violence and harassment, is being increasingly exploited by some women to coerce their husbands and in-laws into fulfilling their unreasonable demands. In fact, the top court's bench also cautioned that vague and generalized allegations that were made during matrimonial conflicts, if not scrutinized, would lead to misuse of legal processes and an encouragement for use of arm-twisting tactics by a wife or her family. In fact, for an overview, Atul has accused his estranged wife, her family, and even a sitting judge of harassment and extortion. Even in death, he's told his story in excruciating detail through a 24-page suicide note and an 80-minute last video. And that really brings me to the big question we're asking tonight on the show. Is there a need to revisit 498A? And of course, to discuss the various aspects of this law and what kind of reform needs to be brought about, I'm now joined by Amnish Aggarwala, the Advocate Supreme Court, Flavia Agnes, women's rights lawyer and co-founder Majlis. Thank you very much, Atul, I beg your pardon, Amnish and Flavia, for joining us here on ET. Now, let me come to you, Flavia, first. Now, 498A was brought in when the society was deeply patriarchal and women used to survive on the salary of males. And of course, dowry deaths were more rampant. I'm not saying that dowry deaths are not happening right now, but of course, perhaps the number was more back then. Is there a need then to look at domestic laws differently? And if so, if yes, then how so?
I just want to say here one point that misuse of law is not unique to women. All the laws are misused all the time. But where 498 is concerned, there is a popular belief that women are misusing the law. But if you really see the amount of cruelty that is inflicted upon women and the amount of deaths that happen within the matrimonial home, you will realize that how serious this offense situation is. It may not be only dowry, but there are 100 reasons why women are harassed and they're driven
Absolutely,
to suicide.
Flavia, but we'll come to that point in just a little bit, Flavia. And of course, I'll go to the Supreme Court's comments on that as well. But if you could answer my question, is there a need to look at domestic laws differently? If yes, how so?
See, unless I answer this, it is difficult for me to say, answer your question, but even then I will try.
Okay.
I feel that the situation not changed much. And the society is still very patriarchal. We also have the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, which is a civil law, which gives women the protection. And if you see both these laws together are addressing matrimonial cruelty. 498 is a criminal law and penal punishment is there. I don't particularly endorse 498A, but I do believe that civil law is most essential to protect women. Women needs to be protected. Now, here there's a lot of misconception that 498 will give women benefit, but that's not the case. But it's the police and the lawyers who misguide the women to make them file under this particular provision rather than going under the civil law. Now, is there a need for a reform in this law? I don't believe so, because I feel that proper use of this law with the guidance of the police, general awareness among the public and the advocates will do the needful.
Okay. So you're batting for women's rights and you're saying that, of course, diluting this law will actually mean dilution of women's safety in our society as well. Let me come to you on that note. Amnish, what do you really, where do you weigh in on this? Does this law really need a relook? And if so, which specific provisions? Because there are certain provisions which say that the process itself is serving as a punishment. It facilitates prompt arrest of husband and members of his family. In fact, the provision also extends criminality to any of husband's relatives. So that's specific. There are many sections under this law. Which specific sections really need a relook?
The moment I was born, I was a criminal by the virtue of my gender. how many more men have to lose their lives, lose their houses, lose their liberties, lose access to their children before people like Miss Flavia will have the slightest bit of acknowledgement of the pain and suffering that they go through. The Supreme Court says today, oh, women sometimes nowadays are misusing the law. What about the 100 other cases decided by the Supreme Court today, in which the Supreme Court refused to entertain any quashing petition filed by any of the 15 or 20 other relatives of the husband who've all been accused of dowry harassment? Flavia Madam says, oh, dowry, 498A, I don't really agree with, but it is still important. I don't really, think it's the greatest, but we should still have it because women in the past have suffered. And even if you look now, it's a problem. Very easily choosing to ignore completely the blatant way wives are allowed to file completely atrocious false allegations for them to get benefit out of it. And when someone says, what's the problem? I say, as a practitioner of law, dealing with thousands and thousands of these cases, it's one thing to say that a woman who's a victim, she should not be asked for concrete proof on day one. Sure. But why is it, I pray ask, is it that a man, be a husband, a boyfriend, a common man on the street, he has concrete proof in his hands, yet he is told by the judge, by the police, we don't care what proof you produce before us. The moment a woman puts a finger on you, you are now a criminal. You now should go to jail. You should now go through years of one, the possibility of going to jail, paying
Right,
money to your wife, you know,
right,
just go through
right.
everything. Why? This man, 3 years, is facing allegations such as attempt to murder, unnatural sex, and for us to say, oh, we don't know whether these were true or not. Did the lady go through a medical legal checkup before putting these allegations? She filed multiple cases, withdrew half of them, and it's very easy for them to say, oh, the lawyers are a problem. I'm
Right.
here, I'm a lawyer, I'm trying my best to
So, Amish,
represent my clients, but
right.
yet nothing is happening, right? What about the police? What about the
Okay,
other stakeholders?
okay.
Domestic Violence Act conveniently passed saying, oh,
Yes,
protect
we'll,
women. How many men have lost their houses to a wife with whom they have spent maybe 5 days, 10 days in matrimony, and now she says,
no, but
this
Amish, you
house
can't
belongs to
really
me.
generalize. I'm sorry, but you can't really generalize that all women must be doing so. It is, of course, law, like Flavia was mentioning, that laws are misused everywhere. But to actually just point it out to a one gender is rather unfair. So I'm asking you, when you say that
Absolutely
there are
not.
not enough legal provisions
Absolutely
for
not.
men,
I am
in
not saying
2020, the
every
Supreme
single.
Court, in 2020, the Supreme Court set guidelines. Hear me out. Hear me out. In 2020, the Supreme Court set down guidelines in the Rajneesh versus Neha verdict, and it called for uniformity and consistency in granting maintenance and alimony. So, of course, the Supreme Court has taken cognizance in previous instances as well. But I'm asking you, what more needs to be done? Because there is a chorus that is building up so far as championing men's rights is concerned.
Supreme Court has been taking initiative since time immemorial. 2014, Arnesh Kumar judgment Supreme Court says we are seeing husbands and in-laws getting picked up, getting thrashed in custody, facing weeks, months of jail time on mere bald allegations without any proof. And when husbands and their family members are showing proof of their innocence, even that is not being considered. It's been 10 years, more than 10 years since the Arnesh Kumar judgment has come out. I ask this to our lawmakers, to our women's rights activists. Can you not have the slightest bit of compassion? And obviously, I'm not saying that every allegation is fault. In fact, I will be the first person to admit that because of false allegations by women to such an extent, nowadays, genuine victims of, say, crime, of domestic abuse, of mental torture are also disregarded, because in as much as the judge and the police will harass a man who is innocent, they will also tell a woman who is a genuine victim, we all know what kind of false dowry harassment cases are being filed. Now, I am not one to look at every single case, because I have not dealt with every single case in this country. I am looking at statistics as they transpire in front of me. And sure, I may have my own slight little bias. All I'm saying is this. Today, if a woman walks into a police station, complains of
Right.
allegations of, say, physical or mental assault against her husband, she has her remedies. Give me the name of one husband who
Right.
was able to walk into a police station, who was not laughed out of the police station. And all I'm saying is that there has to be a
So
little bit of
that you're
balance.
essentially saying that there needs to be sensitization. There needs to be sensitization is what the point that you're making. But I'm glad that you accept your bias here, because Anish, one of the arguments against the reworking of 498A, and perhaps that should rightfully happen for men as well, that it will lead to dilution of women's rights and eventually their safety, and hence there is need for this particular incident and several other similar incidents to be treated as exceptions rather than the rule, because Miss Agnes, women are still vulnerable to harm, and honestly what's happening right now on social media is a form of unleashing misogyny. So my question to you, Flavia, is that how should these disputes really be looked at, and what could be an appropriate approach to look at these disputes, because it's not really about men versus women.
I agree with you. First, I want to make a comment that if you see NCRB statistics, how many women are killed in their matrimonial home every year, year after year, and the number is going up. How many women are committing suicide? Compare this to the men and see. And we run a legal center where women from marginalized section come to us, and the trouble we have to file one 498 case. They have to go repeatedly to the police station. Police say it's a false case. They don't believe it. They have to show injuries on their body, that he's been cruel, he's been beaten. That is not the law, but the police demand this. So it's not only that men have difficulty once a case is filed. It's not that, and I issue, at least in Mumbai, it's this way. It's in maybe in other places as well, that cases are not filed easily, and it's a false presumption to say the minute a woman walks into the police station, the police are recording a complaint and arresting the accused. That is not the case at all. And now even the arrest doesn't happen. Even in acute
Right.
cruelty, the police do not act. They tell them to go to the court under the Domestic Violence Act, etc., etc. And I don't
Right.
believe at all
Right,
that
right. Valid
every
point.
case a
Valid
woman
point,
enters
Flavia.
the
Let me
police
take that
station.
point across to Amish, because he was also mentioning the role of the police. Amish was also mentioning the role of the police. Amish, in the Satyendra Kumar Antil's judgment, which was in 2022, the Supreme Court did issue a string of guidelines that actually require police officers to record in writing before actually arresting the accused. It is then also the failure of the police administration and how sometimes they're deeply mired in corruption, and that further gives teeth to one side to exploit the situation in their favor.
I also want to add one point here, that there's a big gap between
I'll come to you, Flavia, but let Amish make his point. I'll come to you, Flavia, but if you could also let Amish make his point on the issue of how police are actually handling these cases.
Satyendra Kumar until was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Arnesh Kumar actually started this whole process of the Supreme Court saying that men, especially in matrimonial offenses, are being accused left, right, center falsely. That is what the Supreme Court observed in 2014, right? Now, it is very easy for us to say, again, say A is the problem, B is the problem, C is the problem. Police is the problem. That's why, you teach the police, you sensitize the police, and therefore the solution will come. I know when good police officers try their best to do the right thing, to help out a genuine victim of an offense, be it a woman, be it a man, or any other situation, not just matrimonial, or put a perpetrator to justice, when individual police officers in their capacities try to do this, they again face not just the policing system as a culture, but the judicial system, the legal system as well, is so, you know, biased. Now, again, it's very easy for me to be cast as the villain and say, oh, you are undermining women's rights. I am in fact saying that to a certain extent, this has become a men versus women issue, because, and I will say it with the utmost amount of respect, women's rights organizations have always said, the moment you try to make laws a little balanced, in the sense that at least don't let false accusations fly out, women's rights organizations are the first ones to come up in arms and say, oh, then we will not have a genuine victim coming up and reporting an offense just because of the fact that the policemen disregard. I say this as an example. I have a lot of my NRI clients who are husbands, who are men who were, say, maybe in a domestic relationship or in a matrimonial relationship
Right.
with women in
Right.
another foreign country. Why is this not a problem in the US, in the UK, in Germany, Australia, so many of these countries? And let me tell you what happens. The lady in a lot of these cases, obviously, because she cannot,
Right.
I mean, a lady files a complaint.
Right. 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 Right, Anish, I'm afraid we're completely out of time, but very, very valid points made. And thank you very much, Anish and Flavia, ma'am, for joining us and, of course, sharing your thoughts on this very crucial case. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite distressing to see what Atul wrote in his last post that really was about taking his life. It's chilling, to say the least. But to make this a man versus woman debate is incredibly unfair to genuine victims as well. And individual cases must be treated on an individual basis, and that should not really become fodder for narrative peddling for any one side. And last but not the least, family courts also have to dispose of their responsibilities as well. We're completely out of time on this edition of India Tonight. Thanks very much for staying tuned.